Honestly, Gen Z is facing stress earlier than any generation before us, and it's not exactly a shocker. We're growing up surrounded by non-stop digital connectivity, intense academic pressures, and a constant stream of global crises popping up on our feeds every day. Combine that with the anxiety around things like climate change, economic uncertainty, and figuring out how to navigate adulthood without a clear roadmap. It's understandable why burnout kicks in sooner. It feels like we jumped straight from childhood into crisis mode, juggling worries previous generations didn't have at our age. So what are we stressed out exactly? Let's be real, economic uncertainty is a huge stress point for Gen Z, and for good reason. First off, there's this expectation for early financial independence that older generations didn't feel as intensely at our age. We're expected to move out, land decent jobs, manage our bills, and handle student loans, all while somehow still being young enough to be figuring out our lives. It's like adulthood hit the fast forward button. And it's not just the pressure from family or society, we put this pressure on ourselves too, trying to measure up to ideals we constantly hear from previous generations. Everyone from our parents' generation seemed financially stable and independent, which makes it harder when we're still trying to budget for coffee and gas. Then there's the early exposure we've had to economic instability. Seeing adults stressed about losing jobs or homes definitely shapes your own perspective on money and stability. Now, as we enter adulthood, it sometimes feels like history is repeating itself. Markets fluctuating, banks collapsing, and the word recession casually popping up way too often on our feeds. It's exhausting to constantly worry if the economy is going to collapse just when we're starting out. Adding to this, inflation and the rising cost of living have us questioning if basic adulthood milestones like home ownership are even achievable. Housing prices are skyrocketing, groceries feel like they double overnight, and don't even get started on rent or tuition. Even small things like grabbing lunch with friends or planning weekend trips are becoming financial stressors. The reality is, wages aren't rising fast enough to match costs, which leaves many of us feeling stuck or discouraged, especially when we compare our situations to how affordable life seemed for previous generations at our age. And if that wasn't enough, job automation and career instability are looming larger than ever. Sure, tech is cool, but it's also rapidly replacing entry-level jobs we would usually rely on to get started. Career paths we once saw as safe and secure, think customer service, retail, even some tech roles, are shifting or disappearing. The thought that your chosen career might vanish or dramatically change in just a few years is nerve-wracking. It feels risky investing time and money into an education or training when you're unsure whether your job will even exist by graduation, let alone the massive student debt will accumulate. Altogether, it's easy to see why economic uncertainty hits Gen Z harder and earlier. We've grown up in an era where financial security feels constantly just out of reach, yet the pressure to achieve it ASAP never lets up. Still, our adaptability and awareness might just help us navigate these challenges, because if anyone can handle uncertainty, honestly, it's probably us. Digital loneliness is honestly one of the sneakiest stressors Gen Z has to deal with, and it's way more complicated than older generations might think. First off, the constant comparison on social media makes loneliness hit extra hard. Every time we open Instagram or TikTok, we're bombarded with highlight reels of people living their best lives. Amazing trips, perfect relationships, flawless selfies, even those brain-dead memes or those highly jock-fed motivational content that wants us to be rich with supermodels and supercars all around our necks 24/7. It creates a weird kind of isolation, feeling like we're not quite enough, even when we're technically connected to hundreds or thousands of friends and followers. And honestly, that's exhausting. On top of this, digital addiction makes things even messier. We're literally glued to our screens, spending hours scrolling without even realizing it. It's kind of scary how easy it is to fall into endless loops of content, constantly refreshing apps, waiting for notifications, or just mindlessly consuming stuff because it's a distraction from real life. And the ironic part is, the more connected we are digitally, the lonelier we often feel offline. This constant need to check our phones or stay updated creates a weird pressure, like we can't fully unplug, even when it's clear we need a break. Then there's the notorious feeling of missing out, FOMO. The anxiety of seeing friends hang out without you or noticing events you weren't invited to. It's not even personal most of the time, but social media makes these moments way more visible and harder to ignore. It can feel like life is always happening somewhere else, leaving us anxious about not being involved enough or popular enough. It makes socializing weirdly stressful because now every decision feels loaded. Do you post or not post? Are you active enough online to stay relevant, or are you annoying people? The line between staying involved and staying sane gets blurry fast, and perhaps the toughest part part of digital loneliness is that while we're super connected online, genuine emotional support often feels scarce. Likes and comments are great for a quick dopamine hit, but they rarely translate to deep, meaningful conversations or emotional comfort when we truly need it. We've got thousands of virtual interactions, but way fewer real talks about mental health, stress, or simply feeling down. Many of us have tons of followers yet struggle to find even one person to genuinely open up to. It's hard to build authentic relationships when interactions are mostly superficial and quick-paced, leaving many of us feeling unseen or misunderstood beneath the surface-level friendships online. Ultimately, digital loneliness for Gen Z isn't just about screens or scrolling, it's about craving real connections in an increasingly virtual world. And honestly, it's a challenge we're all still figuring out. Environmental concerns honestly weigh heavily on Gen Z, especially since we're constantly reminded that we're the generation inheriting a world already on the brink. It's not like we asked for this pressure, but we're frequently told it's now our responsibility to fix decades worth of environmental neglect. That inherited burden is exhausting, especially when older generations expect quick solutions from us without fully acknowledging how overwhelming it feels to tackle problems we didn't create. There's an ongoing anxiety about whether the planet we're growing into will even resemble the one previous generations enjoyed. Will there be clean air, drinkable water, or forests and wildlife to experience firsthand? Adding to this stress is activism fatigue, which is honestly very real. Gen Z is vocal, passionate, and highly informed, but there's a limit to how long we can sustain constant advocacy without seeing meaningful change. Fighting for environmental causes feels like shouting into a void sometimes, and repeatedly facing resistance, indifference, or dismissive attitudes from decision makers and corporations takes a toll. It's draining to keep pushing for climate action, sustainable practices, or even basic recognition of the urgency, only to witness the same promises, delays, or empty gestures over and over again. Burnout from activism is common because our passion often leads to frustration when progress seems slow or non-existent. Then there's the very real fear of climate-related disasters. We've grown up with news of unprecedented storms, floods, wildfires, and heat waves becoming alarmingly routine. This isn't just abstract anxiety, it's a genuine concern for our safety and future stability. Seeing communities affected by climate disasters on a nearly daily basis via news feeds or viral content makes it impossible to escape the sense that no place is fully safe. This constant state of worry creates a background anxiety that's tough to shake, making future planning difficult when climate instability could disrupt our lives at any moment. It's stressful knowing that events considered rare just decades ago are becoming commonplace today. On top of everything else, there's massive uncertainty around whether governments and corporations will ever genuinely step up and take meaningful accountability. We hear plenty of promises, carbon neutrality goals, sustainability pledges, but often these are vague, distant, or undercut by contradictory actions. This leaves us feeling skeptical and uncertain about whether leaders truly understand the severity of what's at stake. We're hyper-aware that time is running out, and watching powerful entities continue prioritizing short-term profits over environmental sustainability makes the future seem even more unstable. Gen Z is tired of waiting for genuine change, especially when the consequences of delay will disproportionately impact us. Honestly, environmental concerns feel overwhelming precisely because they touch every aspect of our future. Yet despite these stresses, Gen Z remains deeply committed because giving up simply isn't an option. Constant technological changes are seriously adding another layer of stress for Gen Z, especially because these advancements happen so rapidly, it feels almost impossible to keep up. Just when we finally get comfortable using certain apps or platforms, something new comes along, and suddenly we're back at square one. The pressure to adapt quickly or risk feeling left behind is exhausting. Sure, we're digital natives, but even we get tired trying to constantly learn, adapt, and stay relevant. It's like being stuck on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up, and we can't exactly hop off without missing important parts of our social or professional lives. And honestly, the anxiety around artificial intelligence is making things feel even more intense. AI has moved from being a futuristic concept to impacting our daily lives in real time, from education to jobs to privacy. There's genuine concern about how it might affect our career paths, whether it's automation, eliminating entry-level jobs, or AI tools changing entire industries overnight. We're repeatedly warned that skills we're currently learning might be obsolete in just a few years, and that's seriously nerve-wracking. Not to mention the ethical concerns and confusion around privacy and data security, making us constantly wonder how much of our information is being monitored or manipulated without our consent. Then there's the darker side of technology, cyberbullying and online harassment. Gen Z has grown up navigating a digital world where bullying doesn't end at the school gate. It follows us home, pops up in our notifications, and is harder to escape. Mean comments, toxic messages, or targeted harassment campaigns happen in real time, publicly, and often anonymously. That constant possibility of digital drama or emotional harm adds a layer of anxiety every time we post or interact online. It can make social media, which was supposed to be fun and connective, suddenly feel threatening and isolating instead. On top of all this, technology's rapid evolution has fueled an increase in radicalized thinking. Algorithms feed us content based on our interests and interactions, which sometimes leads us down rabbit holes of misinformation or extreme beliefs without even realizing it. This polarization makes conversations about important issues way harder, because it feels like everyone is existing in totally different digital realities. As a result, even friendships and family relationships can get tense or fractured. It's unsettling to watch peers become deeply entrenched in radical or extreme viewpoints, amplified by online echo chambers, and feeling helpless to change it. Constant technological shifts bring a ton of advantages, but for Gen Z, they also bring stress, confusion, and emotional strain. Navigating rapid changes, AI anxiety, cyberbullying, and polarization means we're always on edge. Despite that, if any generation can learn to handle this pace, it's probably us. Though honestly, it'd be nice if things could just slow down a bit. So yeah, Gen Z has valid reasons to feel stressed early on. Increased economic uncertainty means our future feels like one giant question mark. It's tough planning life when jobs and housing markets are unpredictable. On top of that, digital loneliness hits hard because being hyper-connected doesn't always equal genuine connections. Environmental concerns constantly hang over our heads, making us wonder if the planet we're inheriting will even be livable. Plus, constant technological changes make it feel impossible to keep up sometimes. Despite all this, our awareness might actually empower us to find solutions. After all, navigating chaos is kinda our specialty. So what's your plan for the future? Let us know down in the comments below.